Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous, the personification of gold rush, Parker Schnabel. The youngest genius ever to pull millions of people have left the freezing earth. Behind an excavator's controls, he's behind closed doors following a collision conclusion in one of the most startling historical mining cases involving the environment. The gold empire of Schnabel has been stopped, cold, and life was handed down in the sentence: incarceration, no parole, and no remaining appeals. Parker is the same one who utilized his money from college to launch a mining company, who extracted gold valued at more than $13 million, who transformed mud into television by 24, collected $24 million in gold during just season 14. Yet he's now worth $16 million. His dominion is frozen as of this year. Creek accusations are being looked into, and one pressing question remains for supporters. How did the hardest disciplined person perform? In TV history, working miners go from Parker Schnabel was kept away by a legend, is accustomed to being under pressure. The gold game from his adolescent years by 24. He had already stopped $13 already. Millions of dollars worth of gold. His staff is excellent in season 14 alone. Million. And we're currently in season 15 of the gold's price is higher than ever. He ought to sit elegantly, but instead, he is in danger of going bankrupt. A breakdown, and now a significant darker. Because in between chasing ounces and pursuing Parker's legacy, one choice that alters everything, and that's where the narrative changes. Directly into a courtroom and entering, Parker had a single number on his. Remember that the aim was 10,000 ounces. That's more than $26 at the current gold price. The amount is enormous, millions. But to get there, he acquired more than just diligence. Major volume, significant compensation, and no delays. And he took a step at that point that raised eyebrows, followed by alarms. He spent $2.5 million to purchase two huge claims made by Sulphur Creek and Gold Run. These weren't only dirt patches. They were among the wealthiest in history. Locations throughout the Klondike that generated $1.5 billion worth of gold throughout the previous century, but they were also hazardous terrain with unstable, stripped ground. The unidentified liabilities. Parker didn't wanted a chance at greatness, so he hesitated, and he was prepared to discard everything in order for the new claims to be successful. Parker had to relocate his largest wash, exclude Bob from the allegation made by Ken and Stewart. It took 25 miles to get to Sulphur Creek. He offered his longest try to date. Team only needs 10 hours to do it. That's crazy. Not just tight, but they nearly managed to pull it off. Rushed to repair damaged pieces. Tyson Lee logistics were pushed, and Bob was eventually. Things are temporarily up and running. Looked fantastic in just 4 days. Bob arrived. 90.05. O value $766,000, plus an additional, at the elbow cut, $276.01. O from Roxanne and Parker's group surpassed $6,000. 16 million ounces are recorded on the books, and suddenly the gamble appeared wise. However, the clock behind the scenes was ticking as they went more into Dominion Bridgecut and Creek have more problems. Big Red Parker's workhorse wash emerged. After more than 12 seasons, the plant died. The tension bars cost $53 million in gold, snapped, ending the entire process. That plant had generated 3,300 ounces over time, and at this point, it was Roxanne and Bob were the only ones jogging. Parker lost his margin of error when he acquired things to go smoothly. Yet, everything was different from what you saw on TV. Was the legal issue that was already developing. Rushing to amplify his assertions, and before winter arrives, extract every last bit. Parker made quick deals on the things he bought. Adjacent claims made under a private deal that neglected environmental examine the procedures, and the time his team started construction at Sulphur Creek, arrived with inquiries regarding licenses, regarding disruption of a protected watercourse, regarding abandoned gasoline tanks interred on the inquiries about property that didn't have tidy responses that you most likely missed. The initial indications of a postponed inspection, government. Officials' discreet visit, however, the warning signs were present, and as Parker advocated for more efficient operations. Aircraft transporting thousands of yards of gravel via protected zones, those red flags became subpoenas, and then the actual shocking federal accusations were suit, alleging Parker's deliberate environmental infractions, not minor ones, enormous disruptions caused by illegal dredging, several streams under federal protection. Carelessness in the disposal of garbage is linked. Tor turning to that land sale worth $2.5 million, and prosecutors' further investigation revealed additional needed documentation, enable surpasses, and, worst of all, is fabricated reports of inspections signed by subcontractors purportedly employed by Parker's direction. The performance abruptly stopped. Longer than ounces. It was roughly proof. Prosecutors contended that Parker purposefully pushed his operation over legal restrictions to fulfill his 10,000-ounce aim that he neglected by taking shortcuts issues and placed the ecosystem in danger. In court, public safety is at danger. The stats were damning. 68 were recorded. Over $3.1 million in violations in unauthorized changes to the website polluted soil around areas of equipment, and more than 8,000 gallons of hydraulic fluid that was not accounted for. In Parker's defense, the crew attempted to implement the emergency brake. They said that everything was an error, that subcontractors made a mistake, that missing permits were merely documents, delays that weren't intended to be broken. The legislation. But after the emails were removed, one thread got messy up in court. From the beginning of the season revealed Parker urging continuous production and advising his group to disregard agency disruption. That message didn't simply raise your eyebrows, because it kept coming up, and each time it performed, the courtroom became more subdued than the case. Moved a previous crew member who had midway through the season. The left stepped advancing assertions that Parker was aware of precisely what he was doing with his bean, cautioned several times over the unfinished documentation and possible infractions that he continued notwithstanding. All of a sudden, there was no argument over who was in charge, and it was a serious emphasis on a leader who is under duress making every effort to reach that 10,000. The repercussions for ounce goal were severe. The charges were piling up like dirt. Damage to environmental misconduct. Cites, careless falsification of inspection reports. It wasn't an excavation on government property. Error. There was a pattern that the prosecution referred to as intentional non-compliance with regulations. And when the list was expanded to include impediment from serious to career, everything changed. Ultimately, the court did not suppress it. Decided that Parker's behavior complied with the greatest degree of environmental damages ending guidelines for sentencing that shocked everyone in attendance. But this is the twist, as the headlines cried out controversy that was not revealed by the phrase itself. No one used the word throughout the entire story. Jail in public. There was no dramatic mug shot. No walk of shame on television. Rather, Parker disappeared from the spotlight subtly and covertly spread rumors. He was allegedly negotiating restitution. Others asserted that he was protective, custody. But there were no responses, and that silence was more powerful than this. Was the discovery. Channel's Parker Schnabel, the young man who began mining, golden boy when he had pulled in as a teenager gold, valued at around $13 million by, who led 8 at the age of 24 spin-offs, such as Parker's Gold Rush Trail that generated $24 million of revenue in just season 14. And nothing at all. The strange thing is that Parker wasn't He never lived like a flamboyant type. He wasn't a famous person who owned houses, or actually luxury automobiles at the pinnacle. Despite his accomplishment, he acknowledged sleeping on. He didn't blow his friend's couch. In Los Angeles, instead of spending money on status symbols, Heat on travels with his father to reminisce. Weekends spent hunting with his crew, World Vegas vacations and series tickets were. It was never about the money, loyalty and experience that led to that mentality. Growing up, his great-grandfather sculpted a life away from the wilderness of Alaska in 1937 Grandma joined him, and his father still gets up for work at 4:30 every morning. Parker was surrounded by individuals who didn't stop, who endured suffering, who continued, despite how difficult the circumstances were what molded him. And that's what led to his demise. He once spent a whole day in agony, working with his grandfather throughout the summer, having dinner together every night, and listening to tales that span generations, that he says he wishes he could remember the one recorded held greater significance for him than any gold bar attendant was constantly aware of, because money is ephemeral. What was important was legacy, which is currently in jeopardy. It was intended that season 15 would be his return to his breakthrough year, the one in which he blew the 10,000 ounces that he hit. Putting the rivalry aside, it's the season. People are referring to equipment as cursed. Breakdowns allow for consecutive nightmares. It was all stacked against legal threats. Him and Parker attempted to remain determined to work harder, faster, and smarter. Wasn't sufficient, the pressure mounted, and something broke, but no one knows what it was. The $16 million he made follows next. There are a lot of legal reviews this season. The crew has put the claims on hold, dispersed. Some are remaining silent, some are attempting to keep everything together. But everything would be different without Parker at the center. Does not feel the same. Dominion Creek was the Parker's largest. Wager to date didn't simply lease the land like he did previously. Purchased it outright. So there would be no monthly fees and no royalties. But it also indicated that he bore all the risk of that check. He agreed to pay $15 million up front, payment with no reimbursements. And that was just to get going, 'cause Dominion's gold, it wasn't just sitting on the surface. Buried more than 40 feet deep, it reaches would require equipment that costs millions more. Fuel time and labor based on the figures, it seems to be a brilliant move that Dominion holds 80,000 ounces of gold, estimated, at costs on the market right now, are about $2,000 per $160 million, or 1 ounce, is sitting in the, it wasn't just a mine to Dirt Parker. If he could pull it off, he viewed it as a future. 10,000 ounces annually, spread throughout 6 seasons, he would arrive. That was the objective. That was the template. But a catch existed. He was only going to be on the water for 6 years. Permits and licenses, and then no assurances in the event that regulators did not renew. The license that was left in the ground would be completely destroyed. So Parker went, as he always does. Allen and his team began transporting soil by the 25 million bankers that are over. The duration of the claim that degradesto more than 4 million yards annually, and when the substance is actually moved increases in size, becoming closer that sort of 30 million yards. Not only is the workload draining, but its cruise wear is broken by crushing equipment. Schedule lapses cause the pressure to knot. It hits everyone when it simply falls on one person. Tyson Lee, you sensed it everywhere. The whole team, including Mitch Blaschke, were weakly under the gun due to this, had no safety nets and wasn't a lease. Every ounce of delay cost money. Parker, they didn't get back $1, would never return, and Parker's failure wasn't a possibility following that check, not on that schedule, nor at the time his presence was essential to the entire process. More than the annual average of 10,000 ounces. No exclusions. Let's go back a bit. Parker didn't play it safe to get here. From the instant he entered the emphasis on Gold Rush in 2010, he demonstrated that he was chopped from adistinct clothing, whereas other miners purchased toys and trucks that Parker concentrated on. By 24 hours, he had the ground strategy, and team generated $13 million in gold revenue by season. The show and his haul made $24 million, went all the way to the Klondike with him. He was from Oregon, Colorado, and even Guyana. Planner, a workaholic, and above all, a fighter. But something happened in season 15, was a gamecher who moved Dominion. But so Parker acknowledged the difficulties, that the cost wasn't the true source of anxiety. Losing his employees, reducing the size of those who had accompanied him from the to begin with. He would prefer to lose money than lose them, which is precisely why he opted to expand rather than contract or change course. Not bail. He expanded and purchased more acreage. He even locked in a royalty for his operations. Handle Minerals, that a metallic four-sole authority to mine a 12-kilometre area of Australia Creek. That agreement by itself came with a yearly minimum of $1 million obligation. In addition to royalties won each ounce tugged. Thus, in addition to, with dominion to oversee, he now possessed an complete alternative location beneath Little Flake under the mining umbrella. The speed at which the scale increased, which is what caused the crew to, according to Parker, it's dynamic and important. He didn't want others near him, who was incapable of managing pressure if they were out because they couldn't keep up. No second chances, no excuses, and with a long-term potential of $200 million. The stakes were higher than ever before. However, things weren't always easy since. The larger the business, the smaller. There was space for mistakes, and every shattered wash the plant whenever there is a weather delay. Ounce below the quota, and it all added up to. That's where the conflict began. Leaking into interpersonal connections, Parker Rick Ness wasn't around much that season. In actuality, the two hardly ever crossed paths. Rick was the only person Parker saw in person twice. Throughout the summer, they had one significant sit-down on camera regarding a difficult circumstances Rick was facing, but after that, they ran in different lanes. Same is true of Tony Beats from years ago. Tony and Parker squared off against one another. Everything allows for ground royalties, but they were a little farther distant this time. Pleasant mugs of coffee between scenes, little more, as Parker had no debt. Tony no longer owned anything of his own. He had his permissions on the ground, but he wasn't lowering royalties, which meant less connection, but also fewer battles, and there was a price for that estrangement. When Dominion stress first began rising, not much of the outdoors, Parker was trapped in head-down support. Struggling to stay ahead while he was continuing to advance his public obligations, with which he concluded a significant transaction, he kept working on a 400-hole metallic dot drill regimen. He even obtained the Robert the Yukon's Elecki Award in 2022 Environmental Stewardship by the government only 2 years prior to his surgery under judicial scrutiny, which is how quickly things can change during a season in the mining business. The next time you win an award, you're being looked into after hours. Parker remained as subdued as ever. Nomadic and grounded, he didn't dwell in homes or host parties in private aircraft. He spent 1 week in LA, sleeping on couches, and another week in Mexico and occasionally the Bahamas. Snowmobiles, kiteboarding, and spending riding snowbikes throughout the winter when they're not breakdown. He's not ostentatious. He's just wired to push. And perhaps that's a contributing factor in the issue since while the others were curious about how by age, some people in their 20s could earn $13 million. Parker was reinvesting it out there, putting it at risk of double down on new territory and not in a boardroom in a high-rise but at Dominion Creek, 40 feet below Earth, where a single incorrect call could result in an whole season by 2024. According to projections, Parker, at over $8 million, others brought it even closer to $10 million, way that most people didn't expect, for a man who has starred in a highest-rated Discovery Channel series. For more than 10 years, he has not worn watches that are more expensive than a vehicle. He doesn't own any rare automobile, even own a home. With the exception of the humble one sitting in Hannes, Alaska by a peaceful lake on private property, 2000, constructed in 2015, with a metal roof and wood frame that isn't precisely Hollywood. What makes at one point, the rumors were even more surprising. Rumored that he purchased at the $950,000 mansion. Parker was completely rejected. It stated that he was homeless, preferred to sleep on couches owned by friends. Instead, that wouldn't be the case for most people. Realistic, but it makes sense with Parker. The same individual who spent all of his college fund to place a wager on himself in the past, when the majority of teenagers were selecting dorm rooms. He had to decide between different rock formations, and purchasing licenses for the $17 million wager he had previously experienced it on Dominion Creek was simply the loudest, most well-known, And the most dangerous ground wasn't simple. It was 40 feet deep, in the cold ground, gold. He would have to relocate 30 million 6 years and bankyards of soil to create. That's more over 5 million yards, per year after year, without interruption, not only on the devices, but on those who operate, them. Dominion was a large mine, not a tiny one. Parker and the gold-hungry monster were the only person prepared to conquer it. Even when gold prices reached all-time highs, he didn't slow down. He made use of everything he had hired. More equipment was added by a larger workforce. Agreed to royalties with Metallic Australia Creek Pays to mine minerals. Paid royalties in advance and making a $1 million a year. But he wasn't. He was constructing a gold mine, empire, and the Yukon wasn't the end of the task. He traveled to Guyana and Papua New Guinea, Brazil, Australia, and Alaska, from the Klondike, from glaciers to the jungles. When other groups were, Parker was putting it away for the winter. Shooting from halfway across the world, Parker's quest for gold, where few would be brave enough to run logistics in braving issues in languages he didn't speak, altitude sickness, mudslides, etc., stood in the way of another reward. Time became ill in the Andes at 16,000 feet. He was rendered unconscious by altitude sickness, but he persisted. And while the camera continued to roll Gold Rush, Parker's deals for trail streaming rights and merchandise sponsorships, the salary of $2,500 per episode quickly mounted up. According to some reports, he earns more than $4 million a year when you include TV payouts, licensing, and mining earnings. His crew's income ranges from $10,000 to $25,000 for each individual episode, which is amateur a profitable one. But here's, despite the millions, the twist with every show with the full observing Parker in the mining industry was never not really. He was just seeking the money, pursuing legacy in an effort to fulfill his grandfather's standards, in an effort to shield his troops while attempting to demonstrate that someone from a small Alaskan town may face out against the most vicious sector and succeed, which is why nowits more forcefully than everyone anticipated. Because this isn't a famous person involved in. This is Parker Schnabel, the child in the scandal, who was raised in dirt, the man who never give up, the man who created an empire using, to witness it, a digger and a group of Daiadsul paused, even trembling momentarily, fans, investors, miners, and everyone else. This season's $16 million haul frozen his Dominion claims under quiet his legal evaluation of his royalty sites. The future is unclear, and while Discovery's season 15 episodes are still broadcasting, the elephant in the room is well known to all. Everyone senses it even if no one is expressing it. Therefore, the issue is, will Parker return? Does this chapter feel more powerful than ever? Signal a golden run's conclusion.